on the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hello everyone, welcome to Open Line. I am Ben Hall. Good show tonight, talking all about Metro schools, and happy to have with us the Director of Schools, Dr. Shawn Joseph, is once again coming back. Dr. Joseph, thank you for being here.
I love being here. Thank you.
I know it's busy. There's a lot going on.
There is.
And a lot of talk about the budget. So this is a busy time for you, and a lot of questions have come up recently. I want to ask you overall, how would you assess right now where we are with the budget?
You know, I love the fact that there's lots of conversations about our budget, and I really do love the fact that our community has been much more engaged this year than last year. Last year, I think we had 3 budget hearings, and one people came, 2 we really didn't have anybody. This year, we scheduled 5, and all 5 have been with lots of people really engaged. So I think the work that we've done this year to be more transparent about putting budgets out for families to be aware about them. And we've had conversations about equity as we've talked about how do we get dollars where they are needed. But having said that, recognizing we're an underfunded district, so there isn't a school in the district that doesn't need dollars, so that's not the issue. It's just how do we best utilize the dollars that we have. And I really appreciate Budget Chair Thais Hunter and Budget Co-Chair Mary Pierce for really leading a fair process, and the board's full engagement, asking lots of questions and pushing, because look, we've got to get our dollars in the right place to make sure we get the type of academic achievement we want. So it's been good.
One of the things I hear people ask about, I'm just going to ask you, is your driver.
Yeah.
You have a driver, it's been reported, it's out there. Is that typical for somebody to have a superintendent to have a driver in a district our size? And why do you have a driver?
It is typical for a superintendent in a large urban district to have someone taking them around. We have about 550 square miles within the district now, but look, we have to be efficient with dollars. So the driver that I utilize, he's actually a full-time bus driver. So he gets one salary, his bus driver salary. He doesn't get anything additional to take me around. Typically bus drivers have 2 routes, one in the morning and one in the evening. So if he were to take me somewhere in the morning, then his supervisor, someone just backfills his route, and then he'll do his route in the afternoon, vice versa. But last year I visited over 350 different events, and the nature of a superintendency, when you have 86,000 students and 169 schools, my phone is constantly ringing. Texts, phone calls, emails coming in, and as I'm going places, quite often I am required to speak a lot. I mean, most places I go, I'm the one who's speaking. So a lot of times when I'm in the car, I'm reviewing my notes because my schedule gets so triple packed. There's really not a lot of downtime for me because I am constantly in the community. I don't think I know I have not sat in my office for 1 hour over these past 22 months. So the driver assists in that. So as we're going from place to place, I can check emails, I can prepare for my speeches, I can make phone calls because there's just so much to do in this district, and I spend so many hours on the road, unfortunately, going from place to place. Without one, I would not be as productive, and there would be challenges because I wouldn't be able to, be on the phone looking at texts and doing a lot of the responses that happen.
So is there a budget implication to having the driver?
There's not a budget implication at all because you have the bus driver who would have been driving the bus. So his salary, there's one salary. He doesn't get any special stipend or anything, and I seldomly use them where it requires overtime. Weekends I always take care of myself because it's much calmer, so we never have the driver on a weekend. Monday through Friday, we will utilize him, particularly when I have back-to-back events or I'm going downtown from place to place, or I need to prepare as we're going through, because again, I don't get a whole lot of downtime, so in the car is when I'm doing my reading and following up on many things. But now, because what happens is the supervisor will backfill for him, or a substitute will. So if there is a cost, it would be if there was a substitute, if it were not the bus supervisor backfilling in those instances.
So you talk about all the discussion about the budget.
Sure.
So 2 school board members have called for an investigation into the way, I guess, your administration has spent taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
What is your response to their call for that investigation? Is that needed?
You know, so their 2 board members have asked for that. And listen, their job is to make sure that we're using dollars fairly. So, and I think all 9 board members have good intentions. I don't have a problem with it necessarily, because I think it's important for the public to know that there's transparency. And the good news is, look, I've been in education for 22 years. I've been a superintendent before, and I've been in a district much larger. I am very conscious of making sure we do the right thing with public dollars. So we do have the Metro auditors coming in and looking, and it was actually something I strongly encouraged and asked if they could expedite. And I've told the board that I'm looking forward to the findings, and once the findings come out, I would like a public, statement on it so we can put this behind us, because we are focused on, trying to do right by our kids, and we don't want any distractions as it relates to the budget. So I'm very conscious of that, and let the chips fall where they fall. But I always think people have good intent, and people want to do the right thing, and so we'll see where it goes. But I'm pretty confident that there's no illegal, unethical, immoral, bad practices happening. I am confident, and trust me, if I were not confident, I wouldn't be sitting here smiling saying I'm very confident.
So do you question the motive of those who are asking for this investigation? I asked because last night somebody stood up at this public hearing and they accused those 2 board members.
Yeah.
They said this is a public lynching of you.
Yeah.
You didn't say anything, but it obviously brings race into this. I mean, do you repudiate those comments? Do you think that was appropriate to say that? Do you question the motives of people that are calling for an investigation or question what's going on right now?
Well, I never call anybody names. I don't think it's ever appropriate for someone to publicly say something negative towards someone. I mean, that's not appropriate behavior, and it's not something that I would condone or accept. I think public officials have to have tough skin, because people say lots of mean things, and I don't condone that. And I try to conduct myself in a manner that's professional and appropriate, and I don't question people's motives. I always expect or assume good intent, and I think you have to live that way. I guess it's my Christian principles here that keep me just kind of grounded in saying, look, lots of things happen. You can't control what people do, but you can control how you respond. And so I respond optimistically with a positive attitude, and I say to myself, well, time will tell everything.
So those comments don't reflect your feeling?
No.
Not at all. How would you say right now your relationship is with the board? These are tough times, so how would you say the relationship is?
I wouldn't even say it's tough times, honestly. I would not, I would challenge that they're tough. I mean, working in an urban school district is always tough. I mean, some would argue that it's one of the hardest jobs in the country. I have a great relationship with the majority of the board, and even those that we have disagreements with. I can separate the disagreement from the person. But overall, the majority of the board has continued to communicate universal support for the work we're doing, especially when you look at achievement increasing. I mean, recently at the State of Schools event, we talked about the fact that in grades 2 through 8, for the first time in history, we have data that suggests that our students are growing faster than students in the nation in every grade level, 2nd through 8th grade, in reading and math, with the exception of 5th grade math. But every racial group, every student group grew faster than the nation. On this test that we give, the measures of academic progress in reading and math, which is measures a performance of 8 million kids around the country. So it allows us to see how we're doing compared to other kids. We're starting new programs. Next year we'll have 5 new magnet programs, and we're going to start a new new early college at the main campus of Nashville Community College, where in 4 years students will graduate with their associate's degrees as well as their high school diplomas. I mean, we have doubled the number of students that are expected to take advanced courses at the high school level. We have doubled the amount of kids that are getting prepared to get industry certifications at the end of the year. We have increased gifted and talented programs at the elementary and middle schools. And in 18 of our middle schools, we have this STEAM revolution, the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics revolution, where teachers are teaching differently, and we've put in over 11,000 hours of professional development with our teachers, and we're seeing the benefits of that. So I mean, this is a good time to be in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I mean, we're doing things differently from the way we've done them before, but if someone were to ask me, Shawn, are we getting better results now than later? I mean, we have very quantifiable data to suggest the answer is yes.
One of the things that I guess has raised questions, perhaps on the part of some of those school board members, unauthorized purchase requests.
Yeah,
so there's been a report about that. Where the district, this is where the district violates its own policies when it comes to purchasing. The total amount of these unauthorized purchases went from $300,000 the year before you came to Nashville, and it spiked. It went up to $2.3 million in your first year. Why did that happen? What is your responsibility for that spike?
Well, let me explain what an unauthorized purchase is. An unauthorized purchase is a purchase where a purchase order came after the bill came. And that's very important, because you don't want the school system to pay something that they shouldn't be paying. So since 2015, that was the first year we actually put the process in place to monitor in central office, and when we put that process in place, you know, examples of what we call them UPRs. Examples of them, you know, are things like you know, a PO wasn't attainable because a purchase occurred outside of regular business hours at a school, or
a PO is a purchase order.
Purchase order,
right?
Thank you. Or it could be a purchase was critical to the work of a school district. So you had a plumber who was at a school working on something. They didn't have the tool that they needed, so instead of going through the process, they just run to the hardware store. They grab the tool, they come back, they fix it, and then they put in a reimbursement and say, hey, you know, I bought this, and it was after the fact. It wasn't approved beforehand. The fact is, 99.2% of our purchases, the 25,000 purchase orders that we have a year, are done accurately. Only 0.8% are off. Now let's talk about the $3 million that you talked about, because that seems like a big number. You know,
right.
2 million of those $3 million had to do with substitute bus drivers. We had a situation where, you know, we had a shortage of bus drivers, and we had to, you know, you don't budget for that because you don't know how many bus drivers you're going to need in a given year. And those purchase orders came after the fact. We made sure we paid to get the people on the buses, get the kids to and from school, and then you got to fill out the paperwork and then pay correctly. There was another about $500,000 for our programs with Lipscomb University, because they support our reading recovery teachers in terms of trainings and so forth. So somehow there was an issue with the paperwork there. We've had issues, and there were some others that were associated with schools. We had one with Cambridge exams. So we thought maybe, I think 1,500 students were going to take a Cambridge exam, but instead you had more than that. You had maybe 2,000 students take it. So we had one purchase order to say it's going to cost X amount of dollars to pay for these Cambridge exams. Well, more kids took it, so you got to create a new purchase order to complete that order. I mean, those are examples of the unauthorized purchases. So it's not something illegal, unethical. It's not like there is somebody in the organization that bought something that they shouldn't have bought. It's the fact that the paperwork wasn't right. Now, but our goal is 100% accuracy. We're 99.2% accurate. So we're close. but we're not there. But the goal is 100%. So it was interesting, you know, I don't watch a lot of the stories and things that come out. You know, I have people tell me for that, just because it keeps my blood pressure low by not kind of watching myself on TV. But they told me how, you know, they connected the purchase order story, and I just explained what they were, with a consultant, and to make it, you know, so there was the appearance that the unauthorized purchases were a result of hiring somebody inappropriately, and that's just not, you know, I think we have to be mindful of the messages we're sending to the public, and to be accurate, because look, I get being one of the largest public school districts in the country, and being 40% of Metro Nashville's government, we've got to be responsible with our dollars. And the public, we've got to be able to communicate to the public how we're using dollars effectively. You know, our budgets are comprised of local dollars that come from Davidson County residents, state dollars that come from the state, and federal dollars. And then we have different grants, and all of those four pieces comprise that $890 million budget that we have. And we have different rules and regulations for using different dollars and pieces, and we have to do a better job of communicating to the public what those expenditures are, and I think we've got to do a better job of educating the public on what are costs in association to, you know, just the typical costs of doing business. You know, I mean, you know, but recently, I mean, I've had, you know, people, you know, asking multitudes of questions, and good questions, about lots of things about spending. And I don't even use a company credit card, for example. It's rare that I ever expense anything. I mean, I'm very fiscally conservative when it comes to my own spending practices, and when I look at other people's stuff, I mean, I monitor that as well. But
when you see these purchase requests, I guess the concern in this budget time would be that one year it was $300,000, and the next year it's $2.3 million.
But the issue, I think the issue on it has to do with, so what was it? Again, this was an issue that related to bus drivers. That was a $2 million of the three. So I think the number looks big if you look at it in abstraction. I would argue and encourage people to ask the question, well, what the heck did they spend $3 million on? Don't just show it's $3 million. Be explicit. And then you can make a judgment. So if you say, well, of that $3 million, $2 million, well, wow, they had a bus driver shortage and they had to pay extra for bus drivers, and the paperwork came later, it makes sense. Oh, if they're training reading teachers with Lipscomb University and somehow the paperwork didn't get in on time, well, I mean, the paperwork didn't get on time, but yes, we want those reading teachers trained. And then what the other things were. So those were anomalies. This year we're on track. I think we're flat versus last year, and we monitor them. So what happens is, and we do this on our own voluntarily, and it's more thorough than what you see in county government in terms of tracking and monitoring. So every month we look at, were there any unauthorized purchases, and then they get sent to the chief within the organization, who speaks with the person who made the paperwork mistake to say, don't do that again, because our goal is to have 100%, and we want to be accurate with it. But I think the big thing for the public to understand is that these aren't bad purchases, illegal purchases, purchases that are inappropriate. It has more to do with the fact that there was a paperwork error, that the PO came after kind of you got billed, which again can cause, if you don't pay attention to that, there can be potential fraud that happens, and we don't want that to happen. And that's why, you know, it's a bad thing to have unauthorized purchases, but it's important to note, again, they're not illegal purchases, they're not bad purchases, they're not purchases that shouldn't have happened. We should have got the paperwork in on time.
We have to go to a break, but I want to ask one more question here. You mentioned consultants.
Yes.
So you've had some consultants brought in from out of state who went to work without signing a formal contract. That's raised some concerns from people. Is that a good business practice? How does that happen? They come in from out of state, they don't sign a formal contract.
Well, that should happen. A contract should be signed. I don't know the specifics on the specific instance that you're talking about. Typically, there are instances where you can have a direct purchase, where the direct purchase itself is considered a contract. based upon what it is. I mean, they should have a scope of work and they're working with people. That's the rarity. Most do have contracts, but again, the consultants that we have chosen to use are all highly qualified. I mean, one of the things that kind of frustrated me to know what's in was they identified one person, for example, that I heard about in the story. They said, you know, here's a person who had an arts background and was not qualified to, you know, do work. Well, this is a world-renowned arts integration specialist, actually, who has worked around the country with arts integration. So taking the arts and helping raise the level of expectation and rigor in the arts to the standards. We have our STEAM work that we're doing, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and that is arts integration work. This person was identified by Discovery Education, actually. He did a keynote presentation that was, you know, well received in my last school district. That's where I met him. I had not known him prior to that. And then he did some work with our arts integration because we had 70 arts integration schools. So he came and did a keynote to our principals, and a number of principals wanted to know how they could work with them. And then in our district, we push monies directly out to schools, and we give principals the opportunity to work with people. And in the schools that he worked with in this particular district, we utilize them based upon our Title I dollars, our federal dollars to help schools. We have a set aside to help certain schools in need from a district perspective, and he did some work, and the work that he did in those schools are seeing academic gains, and we're pleased with the work. I mean, so that's one example. Now, our work with Discovery Education with STEAM, I mean, that was a $4 million contract that the board did sign. Discovery does some of the best science, technology, engineering, arts, math curriculum and work in the country, and they have helped us train hundreds of teachers with 11,000 hours of training, because in our office we had, when I started, one person that was in charge of science and no one really doing that STEAM work. We hired, I think, an additional 3 people from a grant to be able to support that work, but we have 18 schools with 3 people in the district, and we had to train, I want to say, 25 people in each school, so 25 times 18, about 300 plus some odd teachers are getting hours of training, and all of those principals are get training. And I would
now, are you saying that those are the ones that didn't have a contract?
No, they did have a contract.
These did?
Yes.
When I asked about the contract, you're not aware of ones that didn't have a contract, or?
No, I would have to get that information. I can't speak specifically. That's the rare exception. I think that there was one. My team had told me that there was something with a federal direct report, but I don't want to misspeak. I can follow up and get you that information, but it's the rare exception. I mean, technically, most people should have a contract that lays out the scope of the work that's approved, and you move forward with it for sure. But there are exceptions. We don't just break rules. And if I know, I will never allow somebody in the district that isn't cleared and doesn't have all the paperwork and things done. You know, but there are always unique situations and circumstances where something is last minute and you have something, and how do you do it and how do you get it done, but we've always got to follow procedures. I mean, that's important.
All right, we're going to take a break. We've gone really long.
Yeah.
And thank you for answering all these questions.
No, that's great.
Just a couple more, and then we want to hear from you. So there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We're also streaming this on our Facebook page, on the News Channel 5 Facebook page. So put a comment down there. If it's appropriate, I'll read it. Take a break. Be back right after this.